Ozzy Osbourne may have peaked in the 80s, but he was able to stay relevant during the 90s. Not only was he able to survive the grunge years, he actually thrived. Later in the video, I'll tell you about how he continued to release albums in the mid-90s and create some very popular tours. Before I begin, let me say this video was requested by a channel member. For $2.99, you can join the channel, make video requests, and get early access to my videos, or for 99¢, you can just get early access. There is a join button below or a link in the video description. Now back to Ozzy Osbourne. He kicked off the 90s by releasing a live extended play called Just Say Ozzy. This was one of the albums I bought back in the day. It was released on March 5th, 1990 and recorded at London's Brixton Academy in November of 1989. This was a short album, there's only 6 songs, had a mix of his old and newer stuff. So for that reason, I thought it was worth picking up back in the day. Not only that, it's 30 minutes long, and that's the length of some full albums these days. The album has 3 songs from the previous album, No Rest for the Wicked, which are Miracle Man, Bloodbath in Paradise, and Tattoo Dancer. There's a live version of Shot in the Dark, and that was from the album right before that called The Ultimate Sin, and 2 recordings from Black Sabbath, which are Sweet Leaf and War Pigs. It's definitely a pretty cool live extended play and has a pretty decent lineup. It includes Zakk Wylde on guitar, Geezer Butler on bass, Randy Castillo on drums, John Sinclair on keyboards, and was produced, engineered, and mixed by Andy Johns. They're all top names in the business. But after this, I'm going to talk about an album that was released right when grunge exploded, but became one of his most popular albums of all time. Now it's 1991. Ozzy Osbourne's getting to release an album called No More Tears. The album was released on September 17, 1991. Some say it was released just in time because a week later, on September 24, 1991, Nirvana released Nevermind, the album which arguably triggered the grunge explosion. That was not the only album that was released around that time. Pearl Jam released their debut album 10 about a month prior on August 27, 1991. But the success of Nirvana helped that album pretty much explode and get out of the gate. Also around the same time, Soundgarden released Bad Motorfinger on October 8, 1991. In other words, there were a bunch of albums released within this 3-month period. But how did Ozzy Osbourne survive the supposed death of metal? Because remember, hair metal was at the top of the charts before grunge exploded. I think a major factor was the fact that there were a few survivors in the metal world. For example, Metallica released the Black Album on August 11, 1991, and that's the best-selling metal album of all time. So if you were a metal band and you had a really good album, you might have survived the grunge years. No More Tears became one of his best-selling albums along with his debut from 1980, Blizzard of Oz. It also reached number 7 on the US Billboard 200. Very impressive for a metal album. The album also received positive reviews from critics, and they consider it to be one of his best albums. Now, why is it so popular? I mean, an album released at that time and had to have something special about it, or else it would have flopped. There were a few reasons. The album was successful, it had a mature sound, the songwriting was better and more emotional. He had a great lineup. It was Zakk Wylde, Bob Daisley, Randy Castillo, and there were some strong singles which had music videos that were often played on MTV. One of the singles was No More Tears, and let's take a quick look at that video. This is such a very 90s looking music video. Look at all those bright colors with the blues and purples and reds. It's a really cool music video, but it just looks very 90s with all those just bright colors and trippy little scenes and the water and all that. But I like this song. There was also Bomb on Coming Home, which was a power ballad that had a music video, so let's take a look at that. This one was on MTV all the time. They even played it during the daytime, back when they didn't play a lot of metal during the daytime. But it's another really cool video. It has that sepia tone. Another one, it's just a very 90s looking video, and I've always liked this song. It's just a pretty cool power ballad. Overall, it was a very good album, but he used his success to promote a live album a few years later. On June 7, 1993, he released Live and Loud. Supposedly, this was going to be his last live album. He was planning to retire back then, and we all know he didn't. It was a way for his new fans to experience some of his older songs. The album features songs from his earlier albums, like Mr. Crowley and Flying High Again. Not only that, had a few Sabbath songs like Paranoid, War Pigs, and Black Sabbath, the latter of which was recorded by the original Black Sabbath band when the original members were invited to play a few songs during some of his live shows. He had a few legal problems related to songwriting credits for Shot in the Dark, so for that reason, it wasn't remastered along with the rest of his catalog. But despite this, Ozzy won a Grammy for Best Metal Performance for the live version of I Don't Want to Change the World, and it was featured on this album. Not only that, this track also appeared on the Essential Ozzy Osbourne compilation in 2003. But would you think with all this talk about retirement, he wouldn't release any more albums in the 90s? But there was one more. On October 24, 1995, Ozzy Osbourne released Ozzmosis, his 7th album. He was able to maintain his momentum as the album reached number 4 on the Billboard 200. The album was destined to be a classic. He had an all-star lineup, including Zakk Wylde on guitar, original Black Sabbath bass player Geezer Butler, and Dean Castronovo of Journey on drums. Not only that, he had Rick Wakeman, one of the most well-known keyboardists of progressive rock, and he was on this album as well. But there was one major problem. The album was not as good as many of his previous albums. It received mixed reviews from critics. For example, AllMusic critic Stephen Thomas Erlewine criticized the album for not being a natural follow-up to the previous two, despite praising the guitar playing of Zakk Wylde. But in the end, the album still had a few memorable singles, such as Perry Mason. Let's take a quick look at that video. This Perry Mason video was pretty cool. It has lots of quick changes and different shots. Very 90s sounding, and I know I keep saying that word, but it's very weird. It's a really good music video. There was See You on the Other Side. Let's take a look at that one. This is the See You on the Other Side video. It's one of his more serious ballads back when he was wearing those John Lennon glasses. And it's kind of a strange video, but it's a little more artsy or artistic. But again, it's just very representative of the time. And I Just Want You, which has a cool music video, so let's take a look. This one is very trippy. It has all these weird scenes that don't really make any sense. It also has Ozzy wearing this weird makeup, and it's in black and white, and he's bald, and I don't really get this video, but it may have been the last album released by Ozzy in the 90s, but he still found a way to be relevant, so let's talk about it in the last chapter of the 90s. Finally, I want to talk about Ozzfest. This began in 1996 after Lollapalooza refused to have Ozzy play at their festival. This pissed off Sharon. She decided to create a 2-day festival, and that took place on October 25th in Phoenix, Arizona, and October 26th in DeVore, California. The lineup included Ozzy with some metal bands like Slayer, Sepultura, Danzig, Fear Factory, and Biohazard. The events were successful, and they decided to turn it into a touring festival the following year. The festival had a few problems at first. Many people thought it would be destined to fail, as it was a metal festival that took place in the midst of the alternative rock dominated decade of the 90s. There was also some controversy with including Marilyn Manson, which was in 1997, and that led to protests and bomb threats from religious groups. Not only that, there was a riot in 1997 after Ozzy couldn't perform due to an illness. Despite these problems, the festival had a very dedicated fan base. There were some great lineups, as well as a few shows that featured Black Sabbath reunions. They learned from their mistakes in the 1997 riot. They created some contingency plans for future shows. The festival continued year after year up to 2008, and then the years after that, I think there were just a few revivals. The last Ozzfest took place on New Year's Eve in 2018, and that's the end of this chapter. Let us know if you're a fan of his albums, or have you seen him in the 90s? Have you seen Ozzfest? I saw Ozzy Osbourne in the mid-90s. I remember him being with Megadeth. It was sometime around 1995. It was in East Rutherford, New Jersey, the Meadowlands. I can't really find information about this online, so maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly, but that's what I remember. But check out my previous video that I did with Ozzy in the 80s. I'll stick that right there. Thanks for watching. Give the video a like. Helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.